As the moon rises high in the night sky and shadows dance among the trees, an ancient fear stirs in the heart of the wilderness. What begins as a simple tale of folklore can quickly transform into a terrifying encounter with the unknown, where shapes shift and familiar forms become something sinister. Imagine wandering through the darkened woods, the air thick with dread, as the legend of the Skinwalker becomes all too real. Tonight, we delve into spine-chilling stories of these elusive shapeshifters, tales that will leave you questioning what truly lurks in the shadows. But before we delve into tonight's terrifying tales, a huge shout out to all of you. Your support fuels this channel and keeps the nightmares coming. If our eerie stories captivate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a chilling episode. And if you want to help us grow and keep the fear alive, share our videos, drop a comment, or explore our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Every bit of support helps us bring you the best spine-tingling content. Thank you for joining us on this dark journey. Now let's embrace the shadows together. Have you ever wandered into the unknown only to find yourself face to face with something that defies explanation? Recently, I reconnected with a friend from my days of conducting supply caravans on the Navajo reservation. During our conversation, she mentioned a bizarre encounter experienced by one of the women in our caravan, a woman we'll call Amanda. Intrigued by the tale, I reached out to Amanda to hear her story firsthand. Out of respect for her culture and the taboos surrounding it, we've changed some names and details. To set the scene, the land we traversed was steeped in both beauty and isolation, particularly around Black Mesa. This area, known for its dry, shallow topography and sprawling dry creek beds, transformed during the rare periods of heavy rain into a flood of chaotic energy. The high deserts of Arizona held an eerie stillness, interrupted only by the rustling of sagebrush and the distant calls of wildlife. One afternoon, while the caravan was taking a break, Amanda noticed that one of the lambs had escaped its enclosure. Determined to retrieve it, she ventured out further than she intended. She was following a dry arroyo, hoping it would lead her back to the main road, but as the sun began to dip below the horizon, she realized she was lost. A sudden wave of anxiety washed over her, and soon enough, she found herself struggling to breathe. The dust in the air triggered her asthma, escalating into a full-blown panic attack. In that disoriented state, Amanda lost consciousness. When she finally came to, night had settled in, draping the landscape in darkness. The chill in the air heightened her sense of vulnerability. As she stood up and gathered her bearings, she heard a twig snap behind her. Instinctively she turned, her heart racing. There, in the dim light of the moon, she caught a glimpse of a dark figure retreating behind a tree. It was fleeting, but it felt alive, almost sentient. Thinking it might be her friend Charlie, she called out hesitantly, "Hello? Is someone there? I'm with the Colorado caravan and I think I'm lost." The only response was silence, amplifying her unease. Mustering her courage, she laughed nervously, hoping to ease the tension. "Can you help me?" After a moment of stillness, the figure stepped back into view. It appeared to be Charlie, beckoning her to follow. Relief washed over her, and despite her disorientation, she felt a flicker of trust. They began walking back up the arroyo together, the shadows shifting around them as the moon illuminated their path. However, a sudden jolt of pain shot through her head, like a severe migraine, forcing her to stop. When she looked up, she was confronted by 3 more figures emerging from the shadows. These creatures did not look human. Instead, they resembled large coyotes, their eyes gleaming in the silvery light. 10 eyes in total stared back at her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. As the reality of the situation hit her, Amanda stumbled back in fear. The coyotes remained still, their bodies tense and alert. Panic surged within her as she turned and fled, her instincts screaming at her to escape. She ran for what felt like an eternity, her breath coming in ragged gasps. After about 5 minutes, she paused to catch her breath, her heart pounding in her chest, but then she heard it again, a twig snapping behind her. Glancing back, she was met with the horrifying sight of one of the coyote-like figures perched on the ridgeline. To her utter terror, it stood upright on its hind legs, letting out a bone-chilling scream that pierced the night. The sound was an eerie mix of a coyote howl, amplified through a megaphone, reverberating in a way that felt unnatural, almost otherworldly. Fear gripped her as she ran faster, driven by a primal instinct to survive. Eventually, she reached a service road and frantically waved down a Peabody mine worker driving a work vehicle. Climbing into the truck, she tried to explain her frantic situation, emphasizing the importance of her caravan leader, Buck, who could clarify things to his manager. As they drove away, Amanda dared to glance in the rearview mirror. Her heart sank as she caught sight of those haunting eyes reflecting back at her in the red glow of the brake lights, lingering just beyond the reach of the truck's headlights. Though she hoped they hadn't followed, the unsettling feeling in her gut told her otherwise. When they arrived back at Johnny's parents' house, Amanda rushed inside, desperate to recount her ordeal. Despite the language barrier, since Johnny's family primarily spoke Navajo, she conveyed the gravity of her experience through broken sobs and frantic gestures. Her friends listened intently, their expressions shifting from concern to something more serious as she shared the chilling details. In the morning, after a night filled with restless sleep, they called upon a medicine man for guidance. He arrived with a sense of purpose, performing rituals to cleanse Amanda and the home. Overnight, nothing unusual occurred, and a sense of calm returned to the household. Yet, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her back. Though the blessings seemed to restore peace, her trip was cut short. The experience lingered in her mind, leaving her with questions that would haunt her long after she returned home. What had she truly encountered in the shadows of Black Mesa? And was it merely a figment of her panic, or something far more sinister? Back in 2015, I set out for a hike in Arizona, eager to escape the relentless stress of everyday life. The trail I chose led me through a stretch of desert, gradually ascending a medium-sized mountain that promised to unveil a canyon-like passage at the top. Little did I know this hike would become one of the most unsettling experiences of my life. The trail was obscure, there was no nearby parking, and the trailhead was concealed behind a dense thicket of bushes, making it nearly impossible to find. I had heard about this hidden path from a few locals, but even they spoke of it in hushed tones, as if it were a secret best left untouched. Intrigued, I decided to embark on this journey into the unknown. I didn't typically seek out low-traffic trails, but the allure of solitude appealed to me. As I ventured deeper, the trees began to show signs of desolation, their leaves withered and their trunks twisted. Many were toppled across the path, remnants of a past storm, creating a labyrinth of deadwood that I had to navigate. The air felt heavy with the weight of abandonment, and the once familiar sounds of nature seemed to be muted, as if the forest held its breath. As I continued, I noticed how the path became increasingly overgrown, the bushes thickening around me. It felt like I was being swallowed by the landscape, and a strange sense of foreboding began to creep in. The isolation was palpable, but I pressed on, determined to find the beauty I had anticipated. Then out of the stillness, I heard it, a faint whistle, drifting down from the mountain above. The sound was melodic, holding a few distinct notes before fading into silence. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I quickly rationalized it as another hiker nearby, the only logical explanation for the eerie disturbance. Yet the feeling of being watched began to gnaw at my mind. 20 minutes later, the whistle returned, much closer and louder this time. It was as if the mountain itself had come alive, and I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. I gripped my pocket knife more tightly, a futile gesture of comfort against the growing sense of dread. But I refused to let fear dictate my actions. After all, I was an experienced hiker. Continuing along the trail, I eventually encountered a fallen tree blocking my path. The thorns and branches tangled together, forcing me to navigate around it. As I turned to my right, I stumbled upon a small valley, what appeared to be the remnants of a riverbed, long dried up. At its center, an intricate den made of large sticks caught my eye. The structure was oddly complex, suggesting it had been built with purpose. An unsettling thought began to creep into my mind. What if someone was living here? The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I surveyed the den, feeling an instinctual pull to retreat. Just as I pivoted to leave, the whistle pierced the air once more, now sounding directly behind me. My heart raced with terror as I turned to face the den. To my shock, a goat stood motionless at the valley's edge, its eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. There was something distinctly unusual about this goat. It was larger than any I had seen in the area, almost imposing in its presence. Panic surged through me as I tried to make sense of the bizarre situation unfolding before me. As I stood frozen, the goat maintained its unwavering gaze, and after a few agonizing seconds I managed to regain some control. Slowly I began to step backward, never taking my eyes off the creature. That's when it happened. The goat opened its mouth unnaturally wide and emitted the same chilling whistle I had heard too many times before. Fear consumed me. I turned and sprinted down the mountain, stumbling over rocks and fallen branches, adrenaline propelling me forward. Each step felt like an eternity as I fought to escape whatever was behind me. I could still hear the whistle faintly echoing, distorting into the distance as I finally reached the trail's end. When I burst into the clearing, relief washed over me, but I was still haunted by what I had encountered. For years, I kept this experience a secret, convinced that no one would believe me. I feared they would dismiss my story as a figment of a terrified imagination. It wasn't until recently that I stumbled upon tales of skinwalkers and their sinister lore that the pieces of my experience began to click into place. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. Could what I had seen in that valley truly have been a manifestation of something otherworldly? The idea of a shapeshifter lurking in the shadows, capable of imitating the very sounds that lured me deeper into the wilderness, sent chills down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that the wilderness I sought for solace had transformed into something far more sinister, a place where ancient fears came alive. Reflecting on that day, I now understand the importance of trusting my instincts. There are some paths best left untrodden, and some whispers in the wind are better left unheard. That experience in the Arizona wilderness will forever remain etched in my memory, a haunting reminder that nature can hold both beauty and terror in its embrace. It was the summer of 2018 when I decided to visit my cousins, Drake and Jeff. Excited for a break from routine, I packed my bags and told my parents about my plans. After they gave their blessing, My dad dropped me off at their house just after 9 p.m. The evening began pleasantly. We shared a delicious dinner filled with laughter and stories. Soon we headed to bed, and I settled in with my cousins. At midnight, I was jolted awake by the urge to go to the bathroom. As I made my way downstairs, an unsettling feeling crept over me. The house was cloaked in darkness, and I fumbled to find the light switch, wishing I had brought a flashlight. Despite being 13, I still harbored a childlike fear of the dark, and I hesitated at the foot of the stairs. Should I turn back or continue? I decided I had to go and pressed on toward the bathroom. Just as I reached the door, a sudden knock echoed through the stillness. "Who's there?" I called out, but only silence responded. My heart raced as another knock followed, this one louder and more insistent. "Drake, Jeff, if this is some sort of prank, just stop," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. I waited, but the knocking ceased. Nervously, I opened the bathroom door and hurried back toward the bedroom. To my surprise, Drake was awake. "You knocked, right?" I asked, trying to mask my unease. He looked confused. "No, why would I do that? If I needed to go, I'd go with my mum. I'm scared of the dark." His response sent a shiver down my spine. If it wasn't him, then who could it be? I glanced around, my heart racing at the thought. Jeff was just 5 years old. There was no way he could be behind this. "Maybe it was my dad," Drake suggested, but I wasn't convinced. Seeking refuge from the unnerving atmosphere, I asked if there was a spare room where I could sleep alone. He pointed me to an empty bedroom, and I gratefully made my way there, hoping for a peaceful night. As I lay down, exhaustion washed over me, but my sleep was restless. A few minutes later, I felt an unusual heaviness on my legs, as if someone was sitting on them. I opened my eyes to a sight that would haunt me forever. A pale, distorted figure loomed over me, its hollow eyes piercing through the darkness. Terror surged through me and I screamed, bolting from the room as the creature chased after me like a feral animal. I dashed down the stairs, adrenaline propelling me forward, but as I leaped from the last step, everything around me dimmed, and I collapsed into unconsciousness. When I finally awoke, morning light flooded the room, and I was sprawled on the floor. My cousins and aunt were gathered around me, relief etched on their faces. "You were screaming like crazy," my aunt said, concern evident in her voice. "I heard someone running downstairs and found you lying here with the back door wide open." Panic surged through me again as I replayed the night's events in my mind. I quickly fabricated a story about being startled by a roach to avoid alarming anyone further. "Don't worry, dear, it's all right," my aunt reassured me as we all sat down for a lavish breakfast, laughter and warmth filling the air. Yet my mind was still haunted by the encounter, and when it was time to return home, I kept my experience a secret. I knew my parents would dismiss it, leaving me with an unsettling mystery. Later that week, while researching online, I stumbled upon stories of a creature called the Rake, an entity said to lurk in the shadows, staring at its victims before attacking. The chilling tales described how seeing the Rake often resulted in death or a curse upon one's family. A wave of dread washed over me as I considered the possibility that I had encountered this being. Then, just a week after my visit, I received the shocking news. Jeff had passed away unexpectedly. My heart sank as I turned to Drake for answers. "What happened?" I asked, barely able to contain my disbelief. He looked stricken. "After you left, Jeff kept crying every night. He kept saying, 'The white monster is looking at me.' We thought it was just his imagination." Hearing this sent chills down my spine. It felt like a confirmation of my fears. Jeff's innocent words had now taken on a terrifying weight. No one had believed him, dismissing it as mere childish fantasy, but now, With the reality of his death hanging over us, I couldn't shake the feeling that the rake had taken him. As I returned from Jeff's funeral, I felt an unsettling certainty settle in my gut. My heart raced at the thought that the creature I had seen might have been responsible for this tragedy. I was left grappling with a haunting question. Had I merely escaped by chance, or had I stumbled into something darker than I could ever understand? If you've encountered a terrifying event, or have a spine-chilling horror story to share, we at Eerie Shadows want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us, and let's uncover the mysteries lurking in the eerie shadows together. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more eerie tales and spine-chilling stories like this one.